Welcome to INN's CEO Talks. Joining me today is Mark Saxon, the President and CEO of Medallion Resources, which trades on the TSX Venture under the symbol MDL and on the OTCQB under the symbol MLLOF, and on the Frankfurt under the symbol MRDN. Medallion Resources is a Canada-based company involved in the acquisition and evaluation of mineral resource projects, in particular rare earth minerals. In fact, the company states it is setting the pace in rare earth elements. And as I mentioned, the focus, of course, is on rare earth, a rare earth business strategy involving the mineral monazite. That's one of the elements, and that is a byproduct mineral from heavy mineral sands mining operations, and it lays the foundation for everything else that Medallion Resources does. So joining me now is Mark Saxon. Mark, thanks for joining me. Now, I'd like to start with a little bit of an examination of what mineral monazite is and why it's important, and why it's important that we understand that before we start to look at what those other rare earth elements are that you are working with. And you'll explain how this works, because it's fairly complex, but it's also vitally important as we move into a more electrified world.
It is, Stuart, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. And you've done a very good introduction into a hard topic, and it's a hard one for your afternoon there to sort of round out your day. So I'll give you a pretty good overview of, the rare earth market, and then within that, the Medallion business model and where we see ourselves fitting. So as you said, Medallion is focused on rare earth metals, and so rare earth metals are a small part of the mining industry, but a very critical part, I guess, because of the role they're going to be playing in the energy transition as we move away from fossil fuels to electromobility and to renewable power. So very critical, but very small, and I guess that's why they're misunderstood. They're a relatively small business, but Medallion within that business has focused on, over the long term, seeking a very sustainable supply chain model, and that is to make use of what we call mineral sand monazite. And monazite itself is a mineral, it's not a metal. Mineral sand monazite is even more specific, which means we source it from heavy mineral sand mines around the world. So we can look globally and we can see there's perhaps 30 to 50 operating mineral sand mines. So Australia is big, where I live. Africa is big, a little bit in the US. Certainly Southeast Asia is very strong. Those mineral sand mines were built for the extraction, particularly of zirconium and titanium. So they were built without any regard at all for rare earth production. However, monazite itself is a heavy mineral, and so therefore, where zircon and ilmenite and rutile exist in heavy mineral sands, monazite will also be there. So it's a small amount of a bigger business, and that's why we refer to it as a byproduct. And we're able to extract that from existing mines without having to go back and opening a new mine.
Right, so your resource isn't actually in the ground that you're mining. Your resource is from other mines, byproduct, that then becomes your base resource.
Exactly, and when we look at our financial models and how we build that, really it's almost like another chemical feedstock, I suppose. Monazite is traded every day around the world. We can go on to, in fact, you can go to Alibaba and you can see the price that mineral sand monazite gets traded for. So at the moment there is a lot of flow from Australia, there's a lot of flow from Africa, which all of it ends up in the Chinese market. So there's no other customer at the moment for mineral sand monazite. And it's a very major contribution to the Chinese production of rare earth metals, is this material that's sourced from every other part of the world. So there's a range of very large companies that are operating in places like Australia, places like Mozambique, South Africa, all selling their product into the Chinese market. And I guess what Medallion has identified is that if we are able to divert that mineral sand monazite away from the Chinese customers and process it in other locations, then it's a really great business. Mineral sand monazite is a very high grade resource. So the mineral itself holds about 60% rare earth elements, which is extremely high grade for a mineral. And I guess the other benefit is that it's got a relatively high proportion of neodymium and praseodymium. which are the really key magnet metals, and they're the ones where the real, I guess, the future is excellent in the rare earth market.
And those minerals are very important, not just to China, but to other Asian markets. And China has kind of indicated that what they're consuming, they're not letting out to anybody else. And so, is this why it's important that there be other sources?
Yeah, I guess we've got a number of factors there, and as I said in the intro, it's an extremely complex market, and we're talking about multiple metals. We're talking about a lot of international trade issues. So, at the moment, China is the major producer of rare earth metals at about 70%. Number 2 and number 3 are Australia and the US sitting in behind that. But I guess the Chinese control has a bigger impact, and particularly as we move towards the energy transition, where we're going to be using a lot more of these metals, then other regions of the world, they certainly want to be doing the value add stages and the downstream value add in EVs, in wind, in solar, in batteries. To have that value add, to build batteries and to build EVs, you need to have raw materials. At the moment, because of the degree of Chinese control on those raw materials, then it's a little uncertain the role that Europe and China can, Europe and the US and even Japan can play in that, because they're very dependent on the materials coming out of China. And understandably, the Chinese would like to be producing EVs and wind turbines. They don't want to be selling low value added raw materials. And so that's where the importance of having secure ex-China supply chains comes from, particularly as the market grows. So if we look particularly at rare earth magnets, then yes, today the rare earth magnet industry is very dominated by China and Japan. But as the industry grows, then there's a great opportunity for that industry to step outside of that Asian region and move into the US, maybe move into the Middle East, certainly grow in Germany where there's a small industry. And that's an opportunity for companies like us.
So why is it so important that we have these rare earth minerals for magnets? What does that bring to the electrification of so many different elements, from wind turbines to magnets and so on? Why is it important that we understand that this is a precious metal?
Yeah, sure. And I guess when we look at the energy transition and what's happening there, it's a whole shift away from the single use of fossil fuels into the repeated use of materials. And so instead of mining coal and using it once, we're able to produce these materials and use them multiple times. And battery storage obviously is a great example of that. And so we can say the same things for graphite and for copper and for nickel. But I guess specifically for rare earth metals, when we look at rare earth magnets, they're included in wind turbines and in EV motors. So in an EV motor, what it's doing, it's creating greatly increased efficiency without increasing the weight. And so when you think about, I guess what's been holding back, one of the things that's held back EV uptake is the concern of range anxiety. And so range anxiety is how far your battery is going to take you. If you have a more efficient and lightweight car, then your car goes further with the same battery capacity. So having the efficiency that we get from rare earth magnets is a really important part of the EV story as well, because it adds to battery efficiency. And so you don't need a bigger, heavier battery. You don't need all those extra raw materials, because you become more efficient by using magnets which reduce friction and allow small motors to operate more efficiently.
So with this big push towards EVs in Europe, and of course we see under the Biden administration in the US, they are now starting to pick up that same momentum. How can this not be a rare earth element that is going to be in increasing demand, even though it's maybe not there in Europe right now or the United States? But there's so many mega or giga factories for battery manufacturing that are coming on stream in both Europe and the US. There has to be this need for these rare earth elements for batteries, as you pointed out, because of the advantages that they bring.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, if you look at the industry as a whole, then those of us on the supply chain side, I think we're a little nervous, really, each time we see a new major vehicle company promising a certain number of EVs in 2025 or 2030. Where do the materials come from? And that's a rare earth story, but it's a story for many other elements as well, that the mining industry hasn't really been enough of a focus in terms of investment about where all those metals are going to come from for Europe and the US. And certainly the Chinese customers have been a little more aggressive in the market over the past 5 years, securing resources globally. Europe and the US, I guess, have had a more market-driven approach, a little more hands-off. And so, there's without doubt Chinese customers are there first, and particularly we can look at markets like cobalt, for example, where it's very strong Chinese influence, and for rare earths as well. We certainly have some catching up to do, and I think the Medallion business model of using a byproduct where we don't need to open a mine, where we don't need to go through a lengthy permitting, then it's a really great position where we can move a lot more quickly, and we can gain customers who are crying out for these metals, and will be more so as we move through the next 5 to 10 years.
Right. And of course, as we touched on earlier, China has really clamped down on the export of rare earth metals. It becomes important to Europe and to the United States that they have other secure sources of these rare earth elements.
Absolutely. I think, certainly the Chinese story is a key part of it, but the industry is going to be so much bigger than anything that the Chinese will have control over. So I think that's a great thing for the industry. And I guess what we're seeing as well is a much greater shift in the entire energy sector and mobility sector, a move to a lot more sustainability and an expectation of sustainability. So we need to be demonstrating that we're producing rare earth metals in the most sustainable way, and that's really a key question from our prospective customers. So I think, looking backwards, the rare earth industry has had a bit of a bad history. What we're doing in the future is certainly aiming to improve that, and certainly in one of our recent press releases we talked about rare earth separation, which is a key part of that story. The legacy technique of separating rare earths, and I guess going to some of those really high values, is a process called solvent extraction, and I think the industry is now recognising that perhaps there's better ways to do things, a bit more research, a bit more investment. And Medallion is one of those companies that's chosen a different pathway. So we're using a system called chromatography, which has come out of Purdue University in the United States with a great scientist there, Linda Wang. And finding ways, I guess, of reducing the impact of the rare earth industry, and that's critically important as we move forward in all mining industries to lessen our impact and be sustainable over the longer term.
You know, the people who watch these interviews are potential investors, and they're looking at this saying, okay, what exactly is the advantage right now for me to invest in your company, especially if there's still a little uncertainty as to how the market's going to play itself out and how big it's going to be in the markets that we talked about, Europe and the US. How does this position you? And from an investment perspective, why is now a good time to put my money in Medallion?
Yeah, and I guess we can look at the two components of that. So first of all is the sector play. And the sector play for battery materials, for rare earth elements, for critical materials has never been better. Demand is growing, supply is constrained. There's been a lack of investment over the past decades. Demand is absolutely going through the roof, and so prices are definitely going to move up over even the short term and certainly into the medium term. So I guess the sector play is important, and there's opportunities to invest in battery materials. Specifically, when we look at Medallion, then Medallion has made a lot of progress in a specific business model, which is a very low capital intensive, near term, and very sustainable business model. And so we have technologies that allow us to fit into the market very quickly, at the right size for the market, and then we're able to scale. So our process technology, where we take the rare earths from the mineral sand monazite, we can start on a scale that the market can bear today, and then we can grow as the market grows. And that's quite different to sort of a typical mining project where you have to commit all the capital up front and then wait until the market will catch up with you. So I think we're in a great position there. I think we've got many milestones in front of us as a company, and we're starting to move towards those. We've just recently seen we've ticked a big box with some great work that's been done at Purdue University on our behalf with rare earth separation. That was a breakthrough moment for us, and working away diligently on the business plan of utilising mineral sand monazite, and we're very close to some important milestones with that one.
You know, Mark, you have so many things in play right now. For a first-time viewer, they're going to go, "Oh my gosh, I have to digest this," and I'm going to ask on their behalf. Will you come back and give us updates as to how you're progressing, so that in over a series of interviews, we get a clearer sense of exactly what you're doing, the market, and how you're starting to meet those needs of this growing demand.
Yeah, for sure, Stuart. Happy to talk about any time. And as perhaps you can tell, I've been in this industry for quite a while, and I know far more than is useful perhaps in rare earth elements. But I guess Medallion is very close to a milestone, which is the publication of our techno-economic assessment of our process, which is essentially the financial model. And we'll be publishing that within coming weeks, and that really is a pivot point for the company, where we sort of have that before and after moment when we start to look at how we roll out the technology.
Fabulous. Well, I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Stuart. Great to meet you. Cheers.